You've probably heard people say it before that your punch power comes from the ground. But how do you source more power from the ground? Well, in this video, I'm going to break down one key specific technique that you can implement to effectively and efficiently drive more force into your punch, potentially 10x in your power. We're going to start off by doing a bit of physics. Newton's third law says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if I want to get force from the ground, that means I need to exert a force on the ground. And I do that by pressing into it. You see this happen when you jump. All right? When I jump, I'm loading my legs so that I can push back into the ground, and therefore I will be able to jump in the air. All right? But we don't want to jump. All right? We don't want force going in the upwards direction. We want it going forwards or round in a hook or in an uppercut. So we need to change that force into rotational force. Okay. There's two different ways of exerting force on the ground so that we can turn it into rotational force so that we can throw a punch. The first way is an explosive way, kind of like jumping. But instead of just jumping up vertically, I'm just going to change the angle at which I jump. Right? And that is by jumping more forwards or pushing into the ground at an angle. Okay. And I can do that with my back foot. As I push into the ground here, I can use that to then get my hips to rotate. Okay. It doesn't have to be, I don't have to step with it or anything like that. I shouldn't come out of my stance, but I can push into the ground through my back leg, transfer my weight slightly forward. And as I do that, my hips will rotate. Okay. So pushing and then my hips go. All right. So this is the first way. I'm pushing off. And from there, I can rotate my hips. From there, I can rotate my upper body. From there, I can throw my punch. The problems with this is if I'm pushing myself forward, I'm pushing myself into range, okay? Because my head has to get closer to the target. If I'm pushing off my back foot, this is called explosive punching. You're exploding yourself forwards into the target as opposed to staying out of range. And we know that the aim of boxing is to hit and not be hit. So we want to stay out of the danger zone as much of the time as we can, while still being able to hit well and hit hard. So how are we going to generate force from the ground without exploding forward, putting our head in range? We use something called the hip drop. And that is the secret trick that you're about to learn. I talked about when you're jumping, you load, right? You load your legs, you stretch the muscle, and then as you jump up, there's a stretch shortening cycle in your muscles, and that pushes force into the ground so you can explode up, right? But we don't want to explode up. We want to stay in our stance. We're not trying to jump around the ring. We're trying to throw punches. So to be able to effectively transfer that weight, transfer that force or energy into that rotational force without pushing ourselves forward and just pushing directly into the ground, we need to counteract it by dropping our hips before we do so. So it's a very subtle drop of the hips where my legs are completely relaxed and then I catch myself. Okay. So as I drop my hips, my legs go completely relaxed until I get to about here. And then I push into the ground, stopping myself. I'm catching myself, right? My weight is dropping. The center of gravity is going down, and I'm stopping it by pushing into the ground, okay? So there, I've pushed into the ground without jumping up because I've dropped my hips, I've dropped my center of gravity, and I've counteracted it by pushing into the ground as I do that. Okay, so I'm dropping my hips, and then I'm catching myself. And when I catch myself, that's me putting force on the ground, which means that I get an equal and opposite reaction. I get force put up into my legs, which can then turn my hips and start that connect chain to throw a punch. All right, and when I do this, I don't have to push forwards at all. I can stay back here. When I drop my hips, I'm just pushing directly down. All right, I'm not exploding forwards at all. I'm just dropping down. Okay. Now, using this hip drop in your punch, well, I'll give a demonstration. So for a cross, I drop my hips, counteract, then my hips go, then my upper body goes, then my arm goes, right? So see how there was a slight drop before it? This means I can keep my head back without exploding, pushing off forwards to get my hips going. Okay, so to better understand this, let me just explain one quick thing. When you punch, it's like you've got 4 gears, and the ignition of those 4 gears is you pushing into the ground, whether that's exploding or whether that's pushing using the hip drop. Okay. Once we've done that, then we can rotate the hips. Then there's a stretch shortening cycle going through our upper body. And then there's a stretch shortening cycle going through our shoulder and chest. Then my arm is snapping out. And then right at the end, that last gear that we're turning through is just a whipping of the arm like this. Another stretch shortening cycle going through our forearm. And this chain is what delivers maximum power. But you wouldn't be able to do it without that first initial hip drop. Okay. So timing the hip drop means that hip drop first, you push into the ground to counteract your hip drop or counteract your center of mass dropping. Then from there, you can use that to move your hips because you're transferring that energy going up your legs into that rotational force in your hips. And from there, that's transferring into your upper body. And then from there, that's transferring into your arm. And then from there, that's transferring into the whip at the end. Okay. So that's the whole chain. It's got to be super fast. So when I jump, I don't jump from like down here and then go all the way up because that's too long of a cycle to really get that elasticity, that snap, that plyometric snap. Every bit of plyometrics is super fast contractions of the muscles to be able to explode, right? When I jump, I don't go all the way down here because it takes too long. It's not fast enough. I only go to here and then explode up, okay? You want to jump a lot higher if you just go to there instead of going all the way through there. So the hip drop needs to be fast and you need to counteract that drop of your center of mass super quickly. So it's very hard to see boxers do this, but they're dropping the weight slightly, they're loading their legs, and then they're firing. To practice this, try and do it slow at first, okay? So do the hip drop, and then try and get the hip movement. All right? You see, you can naturally, as you counteract your weight dropping down, you can turn that into that hip drop straight away. So get this bit down first. From here, and your upper body's following. Like this. And then from there, as your upper body follows, your arms can be lagging behind as another stretch. And then it's catapulted forwards. So we've got. And then to really get that snap, carry all of that force over. We're trying to whip our hand over. Like we've got a baseball pitcher. You know how their elbow comes first and then there's like an arcing motion. It's the same in your straight punch. In actual fact, it's not going directly straight. It's whipping over like this. That turning over of the knuckle just adds that extra elastic force and just increases the power even more. All right. So in full hip drop, hips go, upper body goes, arm goes, tension at the end. If you found this useful, and this is just one of the first principles of proper boxing, this is stuff I go in depth on in Hybrid Warrior Elite. That's my online boxing coaching program. The link is in the description for that, or go to hybridwarriorelite.com. See you inside.